Good evening, and a very, very warm welcome to everyone joining us for this evening's webinar. I am Brian Irvin, Comms and Engagement here at CRAE. As you may already know, here at the Centre for Research in Autism and Education, we are a team of autistic and non-autistic staff and students based within UCL's Institute of Education and part of the Department of Psychology and Human Development. Here at CRAE, we aim to conduct high-quality, cutting-edge research, but also to ensure that the results of that research reach those who stand to benefit from it. This CRAE webinar series is just one part of that, allowing people both within and beyond academia to hear from some of the key researchers, practitioners, and advocates in the field. Through everything we do at CRAE, we take a participatory approach, which means we work with autistic people in all stages of our research and initiatives, from the initial design right through to the sharing of the outcomes. We hope that this means that the work we do is meaningful for the wider autistic community. At this point, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of our funders, supporters and team members who contribute to our work and make it all possible. In particular, a special thank you to Pears Foundation for their generous ongoing support that underpins everything that we do. As always, we invite you to become part of this conversation either in the chat or with more anonymity in the question and answers. We will pause recording at that point and we'll endeavour to have as many questions answered as we can by Emily. So today we have the excellent Emily Rubins. Emily is the Director of Communication Crossroads in South California. As a speech and language pathologist, she is passionate about the relationship between active engagement and the development of language, learning and well-being. As a co-author of the SCERTS model, she helps educational teams build capacity and implement a framework for social, emotional engagement and learning. So Emily, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brian. I am so grateful for your introduction and for inviting me to present today. We met originally at the opening of the Windmill School, which is a specialist provision in Barnet, and the head of that school, Ginny Diodorico, is passionate about creating learning environments where our autistic and neurodivergent learners can feel safe and connected with the world around them so they can be actively engaged. And that's what my presentation is going to be all about. So I'm just so grateful for you inviting me to be a part of this series here at CRAE. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right here. I have just put, and I will put it actually into the chat again, a link to the handouts for today's session. And in today's session, I have the opportunity to share the important role that we play as interactive partners in appreciating differences in our neurodivergent learners. In the SCERTS framework, it was designed to give all who interact with autistic and neurodivergent learners guidelines so that we can provide support that enhances active engagement in everyday activities at school, at home, and in the community. While some approaches focus on teaching the learner specific skills, SCERTS is different. We recognize that first, that learner needs to actually find us worthy of attention. The learner needs to find us safe and trustworthy, and ideally interesting enough to go back and forth in engaging exchanges. It is during that active engagement that provides the foundation for learning, developing language, and meeting one's needs in a range of social situations. So it's really about relationship. So I get to share with you a little bit more about the SCERTS framework today. The co-authors of SCERTS have advocated for a paradigm shift since the late 1990s. When we started writing our SCERTS manuals, what we were wanting to do was really truly respect the unique needs of our learners, the processing differences of children who are neurodivergent. And when you do that, the primary locus of change is on the environment and the interactive partners. One quote that maybe will help you remember this paradigm shift is that when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. It's really about changing the environment around that learner so that we can minimize the disability that comes from having a neurodivergent mind. We need to appreciate that difference and change the way we're interacting in the environment so that child can thrive and grow. When our neurodivergent learners are actively engaged, there's likely a match between the environment and the way that their interactive partners are supporting their needs. So I thought I'd start off this afternoon with just one of the videos that really kind of just enthralls me. This is a lovely special school that I've supported in Essex, actually up in Chelmsford, called the Hawthorne School. And what you're going to notice here is a teacher who's matching the environment to the children's needs. She's providing what we call a developmentally responsive environment, and she's tailoring to the unique learning differences of her learners. Although it's a small group learning environment, she knows that each of these children communicate differently. They are all at the emerging language stage, which means they're beginning to develop that abstraction of being able to represent something that's not in the immediate environment in, with either a picture symbol, spoken language, a gestalt or echolalic phrase, and the hands-on materials that she's using to sort of role play this scenario. She's doing something really challenging, which is exposing them to the science curriculum of understanding animal habitats. Right now, they're learning about an ocean habitat. Previously, they've learned about a forest habitat. How is she doing that? By bringing the learning to life through hands-on role play and interactive, material. They've already put the whale, the octopus, and the stingray in there, but each of them has additional animals like the turtle that is going to go into the ocean habitat. She's then going to tackle an even more challenging scientific concept. What about the impact of pollution? She's going to get up after they create this beautiful habitat together and start putting trash in it. And you're going to see that all of these children have reactions that are either pre-symbolic, pictorial, or using gestalt phrases to communicate we need to clean up our oceans. When you provide the learning support that children need, that's developmentally supportive and tailored to unique learning needs, you can see this active engagement.
Harry, it's a...
It's a crab. It's a crab.
Could you put it
It's a crab.
in my ocean? Put it in my ocean. Thank you, Harry. Thomas, put the sea turtle in the ocean. Our ocean is beautiful.
Water.
White.
Dear Harry Thomas.
What happened? What has happened to our ocean?
We must clean it up.
What's the problem, Chester? What's happened?
It appears that you dropped some traps. It appears that you... Let's see. Rubbish. Just as I expected.
Rubbish in
Mister.
our ocean.
Mister, it appears that we got some rubbish in our oceans. I think we
Chester?
need to have a grabber.
So as you can see, we have rubbish in our oceans and we must do something to clean it up. How did she make this curriculum so accessible to a group of autistic and neurodivergent learners? She changed. She changed the way she's interacting. She changed the physical environment. She adjusted the social complexity. When we change the support that we're offering, we can support active engagement. In contrast, though, when we see opportunities to enhance our learners' active engagement, we need to recognize our role in changing the environment and the way that we're interacting so that we can be more developmentally responsive. That's really the full emphasis of the SCERTS framework. So right now, I want to hear from all of you. You've logged on with me this afternoon, and you probably saw the topic. You saw that there was a discussion of active engagement. I want to find out why active engagement is important to you as educators, therapists, family members. I want to find out what active engagement means to you and why it's important for your learners. We're going to try something called an atomic chat, which means I want you to go into your chat box and click everyone so that everyone can see your response and type your ideas in there. But an atomic chat is we wait and we do it together. So if you could, type your idea and wait till I count us down after the end of a minute, and we'll send it all at the same time. That way we can see if other people are thinking what we're thinking as well. If you need more time than that, that's absolutely fine. Please keep typing and share it anyways. Or if you really need to send it sooner, that's also okay too. I'm very flexible. But go ahead and start typing that response. I'm going to get this timer going. Some of you have already shared out, but for those of you who are waiting for our atomic explosion here, I'm going to count us down starting from 5. So I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Send those ideas. Okay, that makes me really stimulated. I love it. And I can see that many of you are sharing out your thoughts. And for example, Kina is sharing the engagement means learner agency, that it's something that they want to learn. It's part of what is meaningful and relevant to them. Others have shared out that it's about communication and trust. It brings to life the concept for all learners and makes language easily accessible. Most of the time, basically including learnings, I want to make sure that they can do it and they can do it themselves. So thank you for sharing out all of these different ideas. What you've shared in the chat kind of aligns up with what I have shared with you, is that active engagement is the spark for connecting, the hook or the buy-in, finding activities meaningful and relevant to one's life and interests and preferences, and being able to communicate one's preferences and interests with others. That's what active engagement is all about, and that's what the entire focus of the SCERTS framework is all about for your learners. So some of you logged on today not knowing what SCERTS is. So I wanted to give you a quick definition. It is an evidence-based set of developmental and relationship-based guidelines focused on helping individuals enhance their active engagement in learning environments. So it's developmental and relationship-based. It's a dynamic model. It was written about 25 years ago at this point, with even foundations back into the late 1970s and 80s when our SCERTS primary authors began research and understanding neurodivergence. The SCERTS model is dynamic in that it's changing and growing with the acquisition of new knowledge based on the insights of the autistic community and all of the available research that we have. I'll share some of that with you this afternoon. But really what SCERTS is, it's a two-way street. While we will be helping educational teams and families identify developmental capacities that would make for very nice outcomes that we can write into a plan for additional learning provision, for example, whenever we select a developmental capacity to support in a child, we're always matching it with the role of the partner. So if we're saying the child will communicate their desires and wants, for example, using a range of gestures, we're going to say when partners make things motivating and interesting and respond to all forms of communication. It's always a two-way street. So it's never about what the child is learning. It's about what the partnership is going to get strengthened by. That's what SCERTS really is, the essence of it. So in SCERTS, it's spelled a little bit funny. Some of you may have noticed there's an S and then there's a C. So it's the social communication that is the first domain of SCERTS. And that's because we recognize that when a child is communicating for many different reasons and in many different ways, they have stronger indicators of well-being. You see a young boy right here named Ollie. Ollie is communicating right now. He's putting his hand above a bottle of water and requesting action. He's hoping that his teacher is going to spray the water on his hand. Appealing sensory properties really get him actively engaged. But when I was first engaging with autistic children a number of years ago, around 30 years ago, I remember being encouraged to just simply model requests for objects. Like I want ball, I want cookie, I want computer, or nowadays it would be I want iPad. Requesting object is a really good function of communication, but it's not the only one. If you can request action, like spray the bottle, tickle me, stop, go away, being able to request information like where is Emily? Where's Brian? When are we done with this? Why are we doing this? Requesting information, requesting action, requesting comfort. The more functions that an individual has, the stronger their well-being will be. So let's take a look at Ollie. He's learning right now how to request actions like tickle or spray. But very importantly, he's also learning how to request stop. He's not yet using spoken language. He's using the symbols as well as his gestures, and he's learning these different things to communicate. But he's learning that he can advocate for his needs because he's surrounded by a partner who's encouraging his request for action and request for cessation or stop. Let's see how this goes.
Does Ollie want spray or tickle? Ollie choose spray. Oh, Ollie wants tickle. Ready? Shall we do tickle? Ready? We do tickle.
And notice how she
Ollie's hands are wet.
gives him time to process and comments on his focus of attention.
Tickle.
Looks like he wants to
I
tickle
want
again.
Tickle. Ready. Tickle, tickle. Oh, Ollie wants to stop. Ollie
At the
wants
very
to
end
stop.
here, Ollie took away the tickle toy, which is really like a dust broom thing, but he's pushing it away. The teacher's noticing that subtle signal of communication and modeling stop, giving him the power to reject an activity as much as he is to request action. When you communicate for many different purposes, you're going to have stronger well-being. So when we design programming around SCERTS, we always think about why the child's communicating and how the child's communicating, and really tailor to the learner preferences, different functions and different ways of communication. But we don't stop there. We also have the E and the R of SCERTS, and what that is right here, the E and the R. That is emotional regulation or energy regulation. It's really about learning how to mutually and self-regulate oneself. We learn how to cope from people who recognize our needs and recognize when we either need to soothe or when we need to wake up a little bit. And we, in the SCERTS framework, provide a developmental framework. So educators, families, anyone who interacts with a child can learn, for example, that we begin with sensory strategies. What sensory strategies are alerting? What sensory strategies are calming and soothing? I was sharing out that when I get stressed, I have my weighted blanket. It's also heated, by the way, and so that just soothes me. It keeps me calm while I'm doing a workshop like this. Sensory strategies are amazing. Then we also model language-based strategies if the child's developmentally showing interest in those. That's like the visual timetables and schedules and things like that, using language to express energy state or emotional words. And then metacognitive strategies, where a student is now encouraged to talk about a future event and learn to advocate for their needs. So, with emotional regulation, we're always thinking of ways to help children advocate that they need support. This young person is going to ask a teaching assistant, Miss Lisa, to give him squeezies. He loves to get her hugs and tickles and squeezies when he goes under this little nook in the corner of the classroom. And he runs over here and he puts Miss Lisa, give. He has to change because I think the first one right there is, a drink cup, and he changes it to squeezies. And she is ready to offer that squeezy at any time, but he just practices it over again because he loves being able to advocate for this.
You need? Well, I'm sitting down. What do you need? Miss Lisa?
It's squeaking.
Oh, yeah. Squeeze, yes. Miss Lisa?
Squeezy.
Squeezy.
Everybody needs to be able to ask for Miss Lisa, give squeezies. That is if you like the squeezies. If you don't, you need to be able to say, Miss Lisa, go away, please. But the emotional regulation domain kind of encourages teams to think about two different developmental goal areas. Mutual regulation, which is how we cope with other people's help, like Miss Lisa giving us a squeeze, or self-regulation, how we cope on our own. But very interestingly, most individuals learn their self-regulation by being mutually regulated. So if you know that deep pressure and squeezing is calming, then you might go under that weighted bean bag like you see on the right-hand side, because it has been modeled and encouraged for you, and you learn that deep pressure is regulating through you. So we learn about regulation strategies through mutual and self-regulation within the SCERTS framework. But really where SCERTS totally comes to life is basically the T and the S. That's the transactional support. If you want to simplify it, it's the two-way street. That's what makes SCERTS so unique, is that we actually have a plan and we set targets and goals for all who interact with the child. When we modify the way we interact and the environment, our learners are going to feel more safe and connected. This is an image I kind of borrowed from the Windmill School up in Barnet. They had been concerned about a young man's dysregulation that you see here. He was asking a lot of questions about the schedule. When are we having art? When are we having music? And just constantly asking. And then they realized that they only had a daily agenda available to him on the wall. He really needed a weekly agenda so that he didn't have to ask so many questions. And so you can see here, it's got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it has the specific times and when those special activities like art and music and a field trip might be, so that he has a visual to help him organize himself and self-regulate. He won't need the mutual regulation of requesting all that information as much. And so changing the environment supported his regulation, helping him feel safe and connected. In the transactional support domain of SCERTS, we're always thinking about our interpersonal support, how we change our communication style, and the learning support, how we modify the environment with augmentative communication, hands-on materials, things that are really motivating to learners. But when you put it all together, the SC, the ER, and the TS of SCERTS equals active engagement. And it can be embedded in any different situation. SCERTS is embedded in specialist provisions, additional resource provisions, also in mainstream environments as well. It basically gets embedded in everyday daily routines and activities. This example right here is a year 1 math class. There is an autistic young man right here. His name is Jaron, and his teacher knew that he needed transactional support for his social communication. So she created a visual chart that helped them know what the academic goal is for the day. In this math class, they were learning how to trade up pennies to nickels, which are in the US dollar system, basically 1 cent to the 5-cent coin. We've now no longer have a 1-cent coin, so I'm not sure how this math lesson is going to go. But then you need 2 dimes to equal, or 2 nickels to equal a dime, which is 10 cents, and 2 dimes to equal, and a nickel to equal a quarter, which is going to get you up to $1. You will be quizzed on the American dollar system here. But she knew that Jaron needed a chart that would help him remember what to say and how to engage with his peers. She didn't just give it to Jaron, though. She gave it to the entire class. And she noticed that when you provide the transactional support that may help the autistic learner, guess what? It helps the active engagement of all of the learners. So they know how to trade up their coins. Then when they break into smaller groups, she also provided Jaron and his peer Angela with a to-do list for get the money, roll your dice, or get your dice, roll it, count the coins, and trade up your coins. That visual support seemed to support his emotional regulation and being able to talk through the steps of a task. So this general education teacher learned that while some transactional supports are non-negotiable for the autistic learners, they can be really helpful for all of the children in the class as well. So let's take a look at the impact of that with all of the children here.
Okay, if I get, can you guys share that one? Maverick, can you and Iverson share? Can you share with Jaron? I want you to look together, share together.
As you can see, once he got the chart in his hand, he turned immediately to his peer and he said, "What is this for?" And she said, "You use this to trade up coins." Now Jaron is literally studying math in the middle of a complex social situation. He's learning there are 5 pennies equals a nickel, 2 nickels is a dime. So he's using this information to truly access the curriculum. I always like to say inclusion is a process, not a place. If we put children into an environment, we need to think about what transactional supports are going to be actively engaging them. That's something my SCERTS co-author, Dr. Barry Prezant, has always preached when it comes to embedding supports within natural environments. Now let's watch what happens when he transitions to the smaller group to work on this game with Angela. You'll notice there is another adult there. That's one of the teaching assistants that there's to help children with additional learning needs in the classroom. After the SCERTS training for their team, they renamed her the Independence Facilitator so that she didn't think her job was actually to do for the children, but rather sit back and think about what supports could enhance the active engagement. She wrote the to-do list right here, and she's able to walk away as Angela and Jaron are able to actively engage with one another.
Can I put it right over there? Yeah. So 5 plus 5 is 10.
what I hope you're noticing is the back and forth of active engagement. He's requesting information of his peer's providing that information, and they're learning math together. That's what active engagement is all about. So I want to ask you right now, what strategies are you using in your settings to enhance active engagement? You've come to me curious today about the SCERTS framework, but I know you're already doing so many of these things. How are you changing your interpersonal support or the learning supports in your environment so that your autistic and neurodivergent learners can be more actively engaged? If you could, let's do that atomic chat again. I'm going to have you type in your ideas, and then I'll count us down at the very end and send them all at the same time. Okay, I'm getting ready to count us down. I'm excited to see what you're doing in your settings. I'm going to count us down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Send those messages. That like gives me this whole big excitement as I see them rolling through the chat right now. And so what I'm hearing from you, some of my friends out there, I can see Justine is in the group, incorporating children's interest into their learning so that they find it really motivating and interesting, and making sure they have visuals to self-advocate for their needs. Kina's talking about hands-on materials, peer-to-peer interaction, embedding their interests. Mary's talking about using their interest as well. Others of you are talking about creating environments where regulation is possible. That's something that both Lauren and Tom are talking about. Facilitating space for processing, not expecting quick responses, is something Kate's talking about. Valerie's talking about providing visuals, embedding interests, really making sure that you're using lots of visual supports to help children predict what's happening, using picture communication as a way for children to communicate, and visualizing. So what you've shared in the chat just now is a lot more than what I just read, but embedding hands-on materials and topics that are relevant and interesting to that learner. You've also talked about making sure that you're affirming and acknowledging all forms of communication. And you've talked about providing predictable routines, visuals, and strategies that are soothing or alerting. Some of you are really talking about providing spaces that are regulating your learners. Those are key transactional supports in the SCERTS framework. So whether or not you've ever been trained or participated in SCERTS education in the past, that's consistent with the SCERTS framework. They're relationship-based supports, they're developmentally responsive, then we know they're going to be evidence-based and within the SCERTS framework that you can see here. Just looking at a couple here and making sure that peers are involved as well. And so is SCERTS an evidence-based model? And well, we published our manuals back in 2006. That's almost 20 years ago now. The whole intent of publishing these manuals was to apply for research grants. So one of the reasons why some are just learning about SCERTS internationally is that we're not a company that's going to put forth, a product to sell to the field of autism. Actually, we're a bunch of nerds. We got together, we wrote this manual and applied for huge grants and somehow got them. And so our first grant was published, it took 8 years, if you would believe, to do a large-scale randomized trial. This was a study called Early Social Interaction, where we were working with very young identified autistic learners and their families in home-based and natural environments with parents and caregivers. And what we did was educate the caregivers to know where that child is developmentally, how they're learning differently, and how to change the way they're interacting in the environment. What did we see in comparison to the control groups? Because we did have a control group. We found stronger outcomes in language, social adaptive functioning, and less behavior challenges as children transitioned into primary school. Then we did a study that was in the publicly funded school systems in the United States by the Institute of Educational Sciences, one of the largest randomized control trials that's been conducted to date. in which we had 300 children involved, but we had school districts from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast. We had control group classrooms where they did not receive SCERTS, and then we had our experimental classrooms. We conducted our research in both mainstream environments, but as well as additional resource provision classrooms as well. And what we found is SCERTS enhanced active engagement, led to less behavior challenges and more access to the curriculum. Children were learning to read. Children were learning their math skills and other aspects of the curriculum. Overall, though, it was focused on quality of life. Both of these high quality randomized control trials show that SCERTS as a framework is an efficacious framework. It's developmental and relationship based in nature. Just wanted to kind of stress all of that. If you're interested in those studies, let me know. I'm going to be giving you my email address at the end and I'll help you access them. But I just want to take a little bit of a turn because providing these transactional supports for social communication and emotional regulation really requires an appreciation of the neurodivergence of our learners. It's essential for providing a transactional support. And one of the reasons why I became so empowered is I got lucky. I was recruited by the Yale Child Study Center at Yale University to do a fellowship in social neuroscience. I'm a speech and language pathologist. Why were they wanting me there? I didn't care. I literally moved house and I went and I did this internship and I learned about autism and neurodivergence from the inside out. And I'm just going to share just a little bit of that with you this afternoon and how that really influenced the SCERTS framework. What we've learned is that in neurodevelopment, there are very predictable developmental stages of brain development that we need to be aware of. And all human beings, for example, begin with this non-negotiable developmental stage of building strong and trusting relationships with the people around them. That is called by most developmental psychologists attachment. Why is that the case? Because human beings learn by watching other people, by engaging in role modeled actions and communicating one's needs to other people so they learn how to advocate for themselves. There's a lot of interaction that happens in human interaction. So you need to have safe and trusting relationships. If you're born into the dominant neurotype in this first couple of years of life, you may be born with a genetic bias toward paying attention to social information. What you're forming at this stage is the base of the brain. The neurologists like to call it the social brain. I am sure the autistic and neurodivergent community would rather call it what it literally is, and it's the attentional region of the brain. I'm going to put my fist up in the air because my arm represents the spinal cord. The fist is the attentional region of your brain. It's telling the rest of your brain what to pay attention to. You have to decide, should I pay attention to people? Should I pay attention to things? Or should I pay attention to my interoception, my level of fatigue and sensory processing and so forth? The reason why I think neurologists call it the social brain is there's such a bias toward the dominant neurotype. And what we've learned is that young children or any human being that is in that dominant neurotype or neurotypical brain, you have a genetic bias that every time you see social stimuli, you hear social stimuli, or you feel it, you get a release of dopamine in your brain. And that makes you crave that social interaction. So when you're hearing someone talk, you actually are listening to that speech. And if someone touches you, you crave that touch. That's if you're born into the dominant neurotype. You will also, if you're born into that dominant neurotype, get a release of dopamine, opioids, another neuroendorphin, the natural kind of opioids, not the dangerous kind that's external. But opioids stimulate you and turn your lights on basically in the brain to pay attention to that. So a child who's born into that neurotypical population, maybe 70% of the population, I don't know, I think we'll be humbled by the science of this as the years go on. But what we see is a bias toward paying attention to people's faces, people's voices, people's touch because of high levels of dopamine and opioids. But that child, it differs from an autistic or neurodivergent child. What we know about autistic and neurodivergent children is they're all different from one another. At the Yale Child Study Center, they were trying to find that one gene that was associated with an autistic learning style. Boy, did they fail. They got like hundreds. And that means there's lots of different genetic variation here. But we did learn that autistic and neurodivergent children may have less dopamine and less opioids in response to people, in response to people's faces, voices, and touch. And so there's less of that dopamine and that draw and that stimulation to social in that early years. But there is something that is consistent across both autistic and neurotypical children, and that is that we, as we interact with that human, are producing a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is essential for brain development. When we're in having a positive interaction with that learner or that child, we're producing that hormone oxytocin. It actually triggers the oxytocin production in the child and goes into their brain and starts growing brain matter. So oxytocin grows the child's brain. A child who is neurotypical is craving the interaction more and so is getting more of that oxytocin. But if we're aware that a child is autistic or neurodivergent, we still can get that oxytocin in there. We just have to be careful. We do want to interact with that child quite frequently, get some active engagement, but we have to make sure that we're doing so by not understimulating the child and at the same time not overstimulating the child, really reading their cues and seeing what their preferences are. Going back and forth is going to help grow their brains. So that is a key part of this. Now, where are children developmentally when they're forming this base of their brain? Usually they're before words. They're not yet using spoken language, picture symbols, Makaton, or other forms of augmentative communication. They're pre-symbolic. The research tells us that when children are communicating 2 times per minute in highly motivating situations, that's when they will shift toward the development of the language hemispheres and start communicating with either spoken words, picture symbols, sign language. So when people ask me, when will my child develop, the capacity to use language, oftentimes they're saying to talk, but there are so many other forms of language in terms of picture symbols, spelling, writing, typing, all those things. If your child wants to communicate messages through language, they need to have something to say. So the bottom line is every human being needs relationship. They need to feel safe and trusting. But there's different genetics that we need to be aware of. Some children get less dopamine and less opioids, so they're drawn less towards social information. And so we still need to get in there with our oxytocin, but we do it carefully and respectfully. Let's make sure we don't under or overstimulate children. We're going after relationship and high rates of communication through gestures and facial expressions. That's going to get our kids to start developing language, to seek out social connections with words. But when children start using language, I hope they're not saying to their peer right here, I want yellow block. If they are, it is just a way to memorize speech, to acquire nouns and objects. Children need certain things to progress through language development. They need people's names and verbs. Max, play with me. Max, pass me the block. Max, go away. Emily's building a tower. Being able to use people's names and verbs and other core vocabulary, a wide range of words is really important, but also a wide range of communication functions, not just requesting objects, but requesting action, commenting. When children can communicate with people's names and verbs and nouns, that's when they develop the capacity to move forward developmentally and to create their own analytic language so that they can start meeting their own needs in a range of situations, learning how to be a student in a classroom or a friend on the playground, and all the evolving social expectations that change from whatever group of people you're with. In order to engage in that kind of executive functioning, you need language capacity, at least inner language, and augmentative language is absolutely secure, and you need to have relationship. All along that developmental path, our children need a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of opioids, and a little bit of oxytocin. And so, as before I leave on this slide, I want you to know if you're feeling genuinely exhausted right now at 4:40 in the afternoon, it is because you've probably spent the day growing other people's kids' brains. And the way that you do that is by producing the hormone oxytocin, and it drains you physiologically to do that. Your pituitary gland is producing that hormone. And then what happens is it triggers it in the child and grows their brains. Did you know that's why you're physiologically exhausted every day being around any child? And then if you're with an autistic or neurodivergent child, you do sometimes feel like you're swimming upstream because you're getting less of that dopamine and opioids on their part. We have to work a little bit harder, but it's so essential to help them provide that developmental path toward more active engagement as we go. So I wanted to leave you with this kind of key takeaways because I could talk about neuroscience all day, but we don't have all day. So understanding our neurodivergent learners is so important. I want you to take away this really important message. While all autistic individuals are unique from one another, they tend to show differences in neurochemistry related to social engagement. So when they're processing social information like people's faces, gestures, touch, and even speech, spoken language is social information. Our autistic learners receive less dopamine and less opioids to pay attention to that speech. And so, what does that mean? It means they're hearing us, but they're not attending to the individual words. That's why many of our children end up as echolalic or gestalt. They're learning the whole chunk of language and then learning slowly but surely how to use that to meet their needs and to express themselves. So we're wanting to affirm and acknowledge that, make sure we respond to function over form and model creative and generative language. But it's also the reason why we need visuals. Visuals are non-social stimuli. They help children learn language to be able to show them words both receptively and expressively. We need to appreciate these differences and adjust our support. So the key takeaway messages from some of the neurology of social engagement is that if our children are getting less dopamine and opioids just being around us, we need to bring it, man. What does that mean? We need to make ourselves more desirable. And looking back in your chat messages, you're doing that. You're embedding the child's interest. You're using hands-on materials, movement, music, art. Those are things that are going to make things more desirable. Having children engage in non-preferred activities is really against our best ideas and wishes because they already think that we're undesirable. Let's make learning reading and learning math and life skills interesting and fun and desirable. We need to bring that dopamine, if you will. Additionally, we also need to make things predictable for our children because they're not paying as much attention to social cues because of those genetic differences. Providing visuals and establishing routines are going to be really important for our children, and you know that already. But probably most importantly is partners must strive to understand lived experience and respect that it's different than their own. We need to be willing to adjust expectations, change the way that children are being expected to communicate, adjust the social complexity, make sure that we're really tailoring to that individual learner's need to be actively engaged. So I'm going to end off my discussion just by showing you how SCERTS is a developmental framework that can be applied to children who are before words, emerging language, and conversational. Just wanted to show you one brief video of each of these three stages. We have three developmental stages, and those teams that are learning, let's see, those teams that are learning about SCERTS, they learn how to identify stage, they learn what are the most important developmental priorities and transactional supports at each stage. But the first stage of our framework is called the social partner stage. And that's because we don't focus on trying to get children to talk at that stage. It's about relationship and attachment and connection. So children who are before words, we're going to want to make sure that they're communicating with their gestures and facial expressions and using sensory strategies for regulation with the goal of forming attachment and relationship. High rates of communication will support that language partner acquisition. There was a lovely question in the chat. This thing, is there an age restriction or limit to when children have more oxytocin and are working on brain development? And while there's been a lot of research of that, just so you know, children's brains don't stop growing until they're 25 years of age. So if we go along with that, children are always building brain matter all the way up until 25 years of age. So we have a much bigger window than we once suspected. While there's a lot going on in the first 5 years of life and the first couple of years of life, and that's really an important window, there isn't really a barrier beyond that because children are still growing their brains. And so we can still get that oxytocin in there. So keep going with that. And so let me show you some oxytocin exchange happening right here. This is at the 5 Acre Wood School in Kent, England. They are a specialist provision, but they've learned about SCERTS now for years. And you're going to see a teacher in the early years foundation stage working with a pre-symbolic autistic child. You're going to notice how they've made it desirable by embedding appealing sensory properties to this child. He likes messy play, little cornstarch and water, but she's also using duplicate sets of materials. So she never has to to withhold or make him work. It's really a natural back and forth exchange. And then the predictability is how she predictably responds to every one of his facial expressions and gestures. Take a look at that back and forth exchange.
Ow.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1, stop. Oh, good boy. Do some more. Ready? Steady. It's smiling again.
So exciting to see this. What you hopefully noticed is joyfulness. If you can achieve joyfulness with yourself and this learner, that is active engagement. His high rate of communication is setting the stage for him to move toward the use of either spoken language, Makaton, sign language, pictures, all of those different ways. We need to start modeling that for him quickly because he's ready to start sharing some messages. Now, you may be thinking about how did she get this one-on-one time with him? She's the special education teacher. There are 7 other children that she is educating right now, but she's got 2 teaching assistants who have used the physical environment so nicely in their environment. They have gross motor equipment outside that probably 1 teacher and 4 children are with, and another small group activities happening in the classroom that is very appealing at a sensory level. So that 1 teaching assistant's working with 3 of them at the same time, so that this teacher can rotate and have a lot of one-on-one time to build that attachment and relationship. Now let's take a look at a language partner. This is a child who's now formed that attachment and security, is communicating at higher rates. He's non-speaking, but developing his language through the picture-based augmentative communication. She's not just teaching him, I want water. She's teaching him to use her name, Miss K, will you pour the water, in a meaningful, relevant activity. She's just taught them that seeds grow into plants by a book that she's just read and some hands-on terrariums and real-life activities. Now they're practicing watering their flower garden, and he needs a little bit more water in his bucket. So he's used his communication tools to say, Miss K, will you pour the water? I want you to notice his confidence in advocating for his needs.
Good job, this is chick. Look.
Good job, Harvey.
Miss K, pour water.
It's K.
He just put Miss K pour water and then turned toward the sink and just expected her to bid for him, basically. That's a confident young man, a non-speaking language partner who's well on his way toward becoming a conversational partner. Once he learns more people's names and verbs and nouns, he can communicate for a range of different purposes. We help him use things like a computer to start typing and writing and learning how to read. We're going to move toward more conversational language. Last but not least is the conversational partner stage. These are children who have creative self-expression through either spoken words, augmentative communication, other forms of communication. Our focus at this stage is self-advocacy. Many people critique the SCERTS framework by saying it's not realistic to try to expect the environment to change around the autistic and neurodivergent individual, which is a very sad state of affairs for our communities, that we don't embrace all of our neurodiverse population. That said, let's empower our conversational partners to tell the people they're interacting with about their differences so they can advocate for the transactional supports they need. Now, this is a group of late primary school-age children that myself and my SCERTS co-author, Amy Laurent, are working with right now. And we're helping them learn how to self-identify what coping strategies might be helpful in a school-based setting. They don't like sitting in their desks for 6 hours a day. So we are brainstorming different things they can do to make it better. They could draw in their art journal and draw pictures while the teacher's talking. They could get out some paper and do some origami. Or they could do some chair push-ups. We're having them rate these as to whether or not they're regulating for their energy level. And we're taking notes because at the end of this, they're going to write letters to their teachers to say, here are the things I struggle with at school. Here are some coping strategies. Would these be acceptable in your classroom? So we're helping them learn how to use written forms of self-advocacy. Sam, the kid closest to us, he's going to suggest, how about I just crawl around the classroom? And Amy's like, I don't think they're going to let you do that at school. Let's try chair push-ups. And you can see that he's pretty enthusiastic about that.
Okay, you ready for the next one?
Like this. Look if I do the next one. Is this regular? It's pretty much. Can it be crawling?
You know what? No, because you can't do that in school, but you can do this. When you're sitting in your chair, up in your chair. Have you ever done chair push-ups?
You have to sit in your chair for 6 hours.
I know. Have you ever done chair push-ups?
Because I'm about to become
Give it a try, Sam.
I'm about to become a 4th grader, and 4th graders are expected at my school to sit down and pay attention.
All right,
very
Sam's
quietly
trying
for
chair
7
push-ups.
long hours.
Sam's trying it.
What do you think?
Push-ups.
Oh, I'm pretty enthusiastic.
Give me a rating.
+2.
Plus 2. So that's something that Sam could do at school. Give it a try, Declan.
All right. And so what you just saw right there was a group of kids brainstorming different aspects of the physical environment, different things that might make them feel more regulated and actively engaged in the classroom. There is a tool that I'm going to share with you. It's called the Classroom Regulator, and you can access that tool on a website called autismlevelup.com. And that particular website is my SCERTS co-author's website. And she collaborates with an autistic developmental psychologist, Jacqueline Feedy, to create incredible supports that are really collaborated with the autistic community to really build confidence around these kind of concepts of self-advocacy. I will go back and just share with you, Sam wrote a letter to his teacher and said, I want to let you know I'm going to be in your 4th grade class. So he put, dear, teacher's name. My name is Sam. I have a different brain. I have at school, here are 3 areas I struggle with: sitting in my desk, playground games, standing in line at the cafeteria. Underneath each, we had him list 3 of his favorite coping strategies. And at the end, he said, if these are unacceptable in your classroom, please let me know before the start of school. So Sam's teacher replied and said, Sam, I agree with you. Sitting in your desk for 6 hours is really hard. Here is a seating chart for my classroom. There are 2 rows of desks. And if you sit in the back row and stand up, you won't be blocking anybody's view of the front board. So in my classroom, it would be absolutely fine for you to stand at your desk. Would you like me to take your chair away? Would that make you more comfortable? And he came running into the class, and Sam says to the whole group, you're not going to believe it. My teacher said I don't have to sit. My self-advocacy worked. She's going to take away my chair. And Neil, the young man over here who's like lounging in the chair, he's like, Sam, don't be a fool. There's going to be days when you want that chair. Like, the whole idea is she's being flexible. That's great, but please tell her to keep the chair there just as an option. So he's the more mature, more, kind of rational young person helping his peer out to know that this is how you self-advocate. There's a little negotiation.
Okay.
So what I've shared with you was a lot of information, but if you want to learn more, I'm going to have you get my email address right there. If you have any questions that are not addressed in our Q&A session right now, I'm going to put this into the chat for any of you who want to reach out to me. You're very welcome to. Also, I'm going to put a link to the handouts for today. There's a QR code here that you can download those handouts. So you can do that here. SCERTS.com is under construction for right now. So if you go there and you're disappointed, just kind of search out the different co-authors. We have better individual websites right now than our joint one. We're working on it.
Emily, thank you. That was, I just sat here entranced. And also that little bit of me that wants to go back to classrooms was just going, there are little videos of excitement and videos of joy. And that's the thing that I saw running through this SCERTS program itself, is that actually, I would say 2 things. As a practitioner, it's about our humility, knowing that we don't know. And then the second point is how we bring about these places of joy. We have 5 minutes for questions. We already had the question about age. And I will say, now that I occasionally educate, should we say slightly older people, it doesn't even stop at 26. That actually there is something about infectious joy in any classroom that allows education to happen. If you could, please put questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. We have one coming in already, which is, how can we use SCERTS to support transitions across school, singular? So I'm thinking that's maybe classroom to classroom transition rather than one class to another class. But please, your thoughts.
Oh, what a beautiful question. When we do our SCERTS training to teams and educators, they learn that if a child is pre-symbolic and we want to support transitions, we want to make sure that the activity they're going to is incredibly desirable. So we're going to make sure there's appealing sensory properties to it, but also that we use concrete objects of reference and not just the visual two-dimensional symbols. So if we're going to do some art, we're going to hand the paintbrush to a child and we're going to give them extra time. And we're going to like let them go last in the line because going with a whole big social group can be very overstimulating and really help that child make that transition. Some of the most difficult transitions are for children who are going to places they don't want to go. We've got to make where they want to go somewhat desirable. So even if it's like to the toilet, I've been in your British toilets. Fix your toilets, make them more interesting. They're boring and not industrial.
Yeah.
Pictures of Thomas the Train, little lights up there. You're going to make a big difference of making those rooms more desirable.
There is something very important about places of beige. We don't want to send people to places of beige. We want exciting places, places where we want to go to. So you mentioned the Windmill School earlier. Their movement area. It's bright pink and purple, and it's gorgeous. And the wonderful Wen Lawson was involved in the colour scheme, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. More questions. Well, actually, we've got lots of thanks. Oh, how would you encourage partnerships and about educating parents at home? I think that might be our last question, but I think it's a great question. How do we take the SCERTS model that we might be using in class and make sure that it's replicated at home? How do we get joy to be portable?
How do we get to make sure that it's replicated at home? Yes, I think a lot of teams that are learning about SCERTS for the first time take that first year to really get it. And then by the second year, they're like, we need our families. We need to make sure that our families are feeling this new sense of empowerment that SCERTS brings. So many local authorities around London are starting to do parent education workshops, doing kind of back and forth kind of conversations about this. So I encourage local authorities to do that. Part of the SCERTS assessment is what kind of a support plan are we developing for families, both educationally and emotionally. So SCERTS can be implemented in the home setting too. That's what the early social interaction project was all about as well.
Very much so. Education shouldn't just be between one boring teacher and one child. It's actually about the communities that we all live and be part of. And that's where humility and joy come together. At that point, Emily, I want to thank you on behalf of all the many people who have turned out. Thank you ever so much. Just in the chat, all the thanks that are going on. It's absolutely brilliant. It's beautiful. You are an amazing communicator, and it's been a joy to have you with us. So at that point, I want to say goodbye to people and thank you for attending. We shall make sure this appears on YouTube very, very soon. Take care, people. Look after yourselves.